Join me as I dive into the complicated world of the US presidential election and try to break it down so you can really understand how it all works in 2024. The US presidential election is one of the most important events in American politics, and yet it's often shrouded in mystery. As we head into the 2024 election, it's more important than ever to understand how this process works. Because let's face it, it can get pretty confusing. But don't worry, that's what we're here for. One of the biggest misconceptions about the electoral process is that the presidential election is a nationwide popularity contest. Many people assume that the candidate with the most votes nationwide wins the election, but that's not exactly how it works. The truth is, the presidential election is actually 50 separate state elections, and each state has its own set of rules and voting systems. This can lead to some pretty confusing outcomes, like in 2000 when Al Gore won the popular vote but lost the election to George W. Bush. Another common misconception is that voting is only about choosing the president. But the reality is, when you cast your ballot, you're not directly voting for the president or vice president. Instead, you're voting for a group of electors who have pledged to support a particular candidate. And let's not forget about the role of superdelegates, who can sometimes wield significant influence over the outcome of the election. The electoral process can be overwhelming, especially for first-time voters. Between voter ID laws, polling locations, and voter suppression, it's no wonder that many people get frustrated and decide not to vote at all. But it's crucial that we educate ourselves and make our voices heard, because every single vote matters. Many people are also unsure about the difference between open and closed primaries, or what exactly happens at a caucus. It's understandable, because these processes can be complex and vary from state to state. But understanding how these systems work is key to making informed decisions at the ballot box. Let's break down the key components of the election process. The primaries and caucuses are the first steps in the election cycle, where candidates compete for their party's nomination. The Electoral College is the system that actually elects the president, with each state allocated a certain number of electoral votes based on its population. And then there's the general election, where the candidates face off against each other in a nationwide contest. The Electoral College is often a source of controversy, with some arguing that it's an outdated system that gives too much weight to the votes of some states. But regardless of how you feel about it, it's crucial to understand how it works, because it can have a huge impact on the outcome of the election. For example, in 2016, Donald Trump won the presidency despite losing the popular vote, because he won the majority of the electoral votes. The general election is often a media frenzy, with candidates crisscrossing the country and debating on live TV. But what really matters is the ground game, the get-out-the-vote efforts, the door-to-door canvassing, and the phone banking. Because in the end, it's not about who has the most Twitter followers or who raises the most money. It's about who can mobilize the most voters to show up at the polls. One of the most pivotal moments in the election process is the voting itself. It's the moment of truth, where all the campaigning and debating come down to a single decision. And yet, it's often the most overlooked part of the process. Voter turnout is notoriously low in the United States, with some elections seeing turnout rates as low as 40%. But it's crucial that we change that, because every single vote matters. The outcome of the election often comes down to a handful of swing states, which can swing the entire election one way or the other. It's why candidates often focus so much attention on states like Florida, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. And it's why voter turnout in these states can be the difference between winning and losing. In the end, the US presidential election is a complex and often confusing process. But by understanding how it works, we can make informed decisions and hold our leaders accountable. That's it for today's video on the US presidential election in 2024. I hope you learned something new and valuable, and that you'll take that knowledge with you to the polls. If you have any thoughts or questions, be sure to leave them in the comments below. Thanks for watching.